All right. Hello, this is Anke, and this is HFP Generic. Um, let's start. This is a very personal movie. Could you talk a little bit in which way it is personal for each of you?
For me, it's personal in that when I came out of the closet to my mother 30 years ago, she told me that she thought she blamed my father because she thought he might have been that way too. And then I later learned that when he was a very young man, he had as my mother put it, real close friend who drowned in a lake and whose body he accompanied back to their hometown of Asheville, North Carolina. And I don't know if my father was gay. I'll never know because he was already dead by the time my mom told me this. But there was it opened a door in my head of just like, what if that were true? What if that were the case? What might that story have been? And plus, I grew up in the South. I grew up in a small town in the South. All the family members are very familiar to me. And so that's why it's personal for me.
It's personal to me because I think that Alan and I have a peculiarly similar history, and that there's a personal tragedy involving a sibling that we sort of feel somehow responsible for, and I think that we both work creatively from there for better or for worse. And also it's personal to me because I was raised by a closeted gay man who came out at 63 and had a 20-year relationship with Andy, who I strongly suspect was the love of his life, and who then died, and my father went back into the closet because of his Catholicism and his fervent belief that he had been committing a mortal sin for 20 years. And I thought that that is tragic. So for me, it was also a what if my father had not had been able to get right with who he was and had been able to really shed that burden of that shame that he felt.
Mm-hmm. The movie is taking place in the 70s in South Carolina, where people have been rather closed-minded to the LGBTQ plus community. Now it is 50 years later, almost 50 years later. Do you feel things have changed or have changed enough?
I personally feel like things have changed a lot, but no, they have not changed enough. And I think until we get to a place where it doesn't matter to anybody what your skin color is, what gender you are, what your gender identification is, whether you're gay or straight, until we reach a point where none of that stuff matters and we all see each other just as fellow human beings, I think we still have work to do.
Paul?
Oh my God! Yeah, I mean 100%. I live in and raise my children in New York City at a really progressive school, and you know, my daughter is so young, she's not even thinking about this yet. But both my sons feel no pressure to decide what they are. I'm not sure they ever will. You know what I mean? In terms of what their preference is, whether they, you know, it's wonderful. So yes, we've come a long way. But I'm in, you know, metropolitan New York City in a really fancy progressive school. So you know, of course, there is still a lot of work to do. But I am really heartened to watch these children, you know, now and around me, the friends of my children, who have a freedom that I just don't think was felt available to us when we were kids. I don't know about you, Alan.
Definitely did not feel available at all.
And then more on the lighter side, the 70s also has its beauty, certain, you know, family gatherings, certain food, certain clothes. Maybe I think you might have been a little too young to be around that time, 1973. But
I was a sophomore in high school in 1973.
I didn't want to date you, Ellen. But so talk a little bit about the research, the beauty that you found in the 70s, and your favorite family gathering that you remember.
I mean, certainly the 70s has such a specific visual style, and it was certainly fun making the movie with production design and costume design and the kind of cars they would be driving, and I'm sure, and also doing it for a shoestring budget because we had no money and no time. In terms of family gatherings, I remember my brother and sister-in-law had a house that was on a lake, and I remember cookouts around on the dock of that went out into the lake, and I remember that, and I remember the women spending all their time in the kitchen and the men spending all their time in the den watching sports on television or fishing. And I just sort of was like, well, I don't really belong anywhere. And so I started observing people thinking, well, I'll just write a movie about this in 30 years.
Well, same question to you.
The question is about the beauty of the 70s and favorite family gathering. Okay. I grew up in the 70s. I feel very much, I mean, I was born in 1971. I was very aware of the 70s. It was very intense period in London. I grew up in London, and you know, the sort of the poverty. I think it was very similar in New York City actually at the time. The poverty, but also the mad creativity of the 70s. I think was. And in London, especially, there was a real change in the way children were educated, real sort of progressiveness in the education system in the London Education Authority, which I was a part of. So I kind of have a real love for the 70s. It seemed grey and bleak, but there was amazing music and amazing art going on, and you know, so I sort of miss that. And as far as my favorite family gathering is, I always had a fantasy of what Christmas would be. It never really was in my household the way I wanted it to be, and it is now. We at Christmas and into New Year's, we have a huge gathering up in Vermont where you know, we have about 30 people come and stay for a week, and we have gigs. I have a band room here in a barn with amazing guitars and drums and amplifiers and microphones, and everybody gets up and I mean, everybody gets up. Oh, you know, Auntie Rachel, you know, and Uncle Hank get up, and you know, we all sing, and it's a great shindig for a week. I love it. I spend the year looking forward to it.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy I got to talk to you again. I forgot to tell my cat no monkey business, but I think we managed well. So thank you again. And so stay healthy.